The Amber Alert Podcast.
Welcome back, Amber Alert Podcast, episode 113, part 2. I am your host, Amber Starkey. It's a great day to be alive. It's a great Friday. Feels good. It's nice outside. It's not too hot. Everything's good. So as I said, or if you know, part 2 is always the conspiracy theory or supernatural portion, the middle portion to each episode. I personally find stuff like this interesting, which is why I like to talk about it. I've always enjoyed subjects like, is this real or is it not? People report it. People say they've seen it. They say they've experienced this. So I like to look into this stuff. I do think when I was younger, I was quick to dismiss things because I just was like, a lot of it was probably ignorance, where I was like, if this was real, I would like know about it, which is actually arrogance and ignorance. But, or I just thought like, that sounds insane, so that can't be real. But I think I've grown up a little bit. And, since I started to give things a chance, like actually look into it, because here's the thing, if you hear about something and it sounds insane, and you've never heard it before, it's very easy to dismiss it and be like, whatever. But if you actually give it a chance and look into it, then you might find that whatever the subject is, you may find that it's actually way too big to be easily dismissed. Like if you have thousands of people who've told a similar story, they've all had the same experience, and yet they're on other, like, different ends of the world. They have nothing in common beyond this. It's not like they've listened to each other. Then there's probably something to it. Now, even with all of those cases, everyone has a right to make up their own mind about it. So if you're intellectually honest, you'd want to look at the facts, and then you can come up with your own interpretation of what you think is happening. So for me, I've never, ever been one to look like, to enjoy paranormal movies. I just like, I've seen a couple of them. I don't like them. I mean, some of them are sort of scary, but I also just like think, I don't know. I don't like feel good watching it. So why would I want to watch it? That's why I don't understand people who want to get scared. They'll pay money to get scared. It doesn't sound like a good time to me, so I don't enjoy stuff like that. However, in some of the cases, something real did happen. There are some facts that are the reason why a story came out of it. So we're going to look at a couple of those cases. There are some real facts. And then probably the popular interpretation is that this is just a haunted house. This is the ghost of a person who was murdered in the house or whatever. I don't believe that's what happened, but I'm not going to deny the facts of the case. So let's go ahead and look at the first one. This is the Greenbrier ghost. So this is one of the strangest true crime stories in American history, because the murder was real, the conviction was real, and even the state of West Virginia officially commemorates the role the ghost story played in reopening the case. So this is interesting. So here's the beginning. There was a quick marriage. In late 1896, a young woman named Elva Zona Heaster Shue, usually called Zona, married a blacksmith named Erasmus Stribling Trout Shue. I don't know why all of them had 4 names. In rural Greenbrier County, West Virginia. Zona's mother, Mary Jane Heaster, reportedly disliked Shue from the start and didn't trust him. So she's like, listen, this guy's vibes are off. But to be fair, a lot of mothers don't like who their kids marry. So anyway, the death on January 23, 1897, Zona was found dead in her home. So pretty short marriage. Almost immediately, people noticed strange behavior from her husband. Before the doctor arrived, Shue had already dressed the body himself, put a high-necked dress on her, wrapped her neck with a scarf, and prevented people from closely examining her head and neck. So if you're messing with a dead body right after they die, that's a sus behavior. When the local doctor arrived, she was emotional. Oh, I'm sorry, Shu. Shu was emotional and protective of the body, so that the examination was never completed. So at that point, somebody's got to be the alpha and say, listen, you cannot like it, but I'm coming in and I'm going to examine the body. Somebody needed to do that. The death was initially ruled natural. Depending on the record, causes listed, I'm having a hard time reading this. Causes listed included heart failure, everlasting faint, must have been a thing back then, or complications related to childbirth. Okay, so the murder is kind of sus. And then this happens after the funeral. Mary Jane Heaster claimed her daughter began appearing to her at night. So she swears she's seeing her daughter's ghost. According to Mary Jane, Zona appeared 4 nights in a row. She told her mother that she had been murdered. She said her husband became enraged and he grabbed her and broke her neck. So in some versions of the story, Zona supposedly demonstrated this by turning her head completely around to show the injury. So that sounds like, what is that movie where the girl's head turns around? The Exorcist. Okay. So the mother goes to the authorities. Mary Jane became convinced the death was murder. She repeatedly visited prosecutor John Alfred Preston and urged him to investigate. Whether Preston believed the ghost story is unknown. What mattered was that he began looking into the case and discovered the original medical examination had never been completed. So he's like, oh. So they exhumed the body and an autopsy was ordered. What doctors found shocked everyone. The neck was broken. The windpipe was crushed. There was signs of strangulation and damage between the first and second cervical vertebrae. So the death was officially changed from natural causes to murder. During the trial, investigators uncovered troubling information about Shu. He had multiple previous marriages. One former wife accused him of cruelty. Another wife had died under suspicious circumstances. The defense attorney thought he could discredit Mary Jane by questioning her extensively about the ghost. Instead, she calmly repeated her story and never changed it. Ironically, the defense itself brought the ghost story into the courtroom. The prosecution focused mainly on physical evidence and Shu's behavior. So the verdict on July 11, 1897, Shu was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. He died in prison a few years later. I wonder how he died in prison, but why the case is famous. The important distinction is this. No court convicted Shu because a ghost testified, but the conviction came from the autopsy, the physical evidence, witness testimony, and Shu's suspicious conduct. However, the ghost story is what persuaded the mother to keep pushing authorities until the body was exhumed. Without the pressure, the murder might never have been discovered. That's why West Virginia's historical marker calls it the only known case where testimony from a ghost helped convict a murderer. The skeptical explanation, many historians think Mary Jane probably suspected Shu all along. She may have noticed bruising on Zona's neck, found Shu's behavior odd, or heard rumors about his past. Okay? So it's an interesting story because she did not change her story. She did not seem like a psycho in court when she testified, like, no, I saw my daughter's ghost and it told me that her husband murdered her. Okay. And then, the case, the case gets kind of reopened. And when they exhume the body and do an actual examination, they're like, oh, that's actually exactly what happened is her neck got broken and she was strangled and some other stuff. So my opinion, I don't doubt that the mom saw something. And it is true. She could have been suspicious, which, okay, of course you're going to be. Don't they always look at the spouse first? And then second of all, she didn't like him before they got married. So naturally, yeah, you're probably going to want to take a second look at him. I don't think you need to see a ghost in order to do that. But what is sort of undeniable is that what she said so specifically, and then when they do the medical examination, they find out, yes, that's exactly what happened. And she was very calm and collected in court, never, at that point, or at least after the case, she could have said once he got convicted of murder and went to prison, she could have been like, yeah, by the way, I didn't actually see a ghost, but I just knew it was him, and as far as I know, she never did that. So, I don't doubt that she saw something. Was it the ghost of her daughter? No, in my opinion. And I will tell you why I think that, but we're not going to get to that yet because we're going to read another story. So, what is the Brown Lady of Raynham Hall? I don't know if I'm saying that right. So, this is probably the most famous ghost story in the world because it has 3 things that most ghost stories don't: a real historical person, reported sightings going back about 100 years before the photo, and a photograph that appeared to capture the figure. Okay, I'll show you the photograph in a little bit. So, who was the Brown Lady? The ghost is traditionally identified as Dorothy Walpole, sister of Robert Walpole. She married Charles Townshend and lived at Raynham Hall in Norfolk, England. I will pause and say this. And we're gonna listen to a video by Lester Sumrall in a little bit. He said the most ghost stories or haunted houses that he's ever been aware of the majority of them were in England. So I don't know why, but for some reason England has more haunted houses than anywhere. I just don't know the reason for it. Okay, next. So what so they said, what would this leave off as? Okay, so there's supposedly a photograph that captures the figure in this house. So when the negative was developed, there appeared to be a translucent woman floating down the staircase. The image was published later that year and became world famous. So why people thought it was Dorothy? This wasn't just a random ghost photo. For generations, witnesses had already been describing a woman wearing old-fashioned clothing, appearing on the staircase and corridors, and then associated with Dorothy Walpole. So the photograph seemed to match the existing legend rather than creating a new one. That's a major reason it became so famous. So this is the house where this supposedly happened. That's like a normal picture. And then the picture in question that people believe is the ghost is this. Which obviously, yeah, if you look at it, it does look like a ghost on a staircase. Now, there are things you can do in photography to kind of manipulate pictures to appear that way. So I guess the least convincing thing about this story for me is that picture. But lots of people kind of relied on the picture to convince them, which is fine. I just am not convinced by the picture. So anyway, why skeptics aren't convinced? Skeptics have proposed double exposure, accidental light effects, camera errors, or a staged image, or even a person moving during a long exposure. So that's what I'm saying. There are ways you can manipulate pictures. So researchers such as Joe Nickell argued the image shows signs of double exposure. Others have recreated very similar photos using ordinary photographic techniques. Why it still gets discussed, even many paranormal researchers admit the photograph itself is not conclusive proof. That's what I'm saying. The photograph to me is the least convincing thing about the whole story. Okay, next. So what makes the case interesting at the what is the combination of this. So there's an identifiable historical figure, a location with a long reputation for hauntings, multiple witnesses all witness reports predate the photograph, a photograph taken by professional photographers rather than random tourists. So the strongest version of the story isn't really a ghost was photographed. It's that for roughly a century before the photo, people were already claiming to see the same female apparition in the same location. And then in 1936, a photograph appeared that seemed to match these reports. Okay. So whether that's evidence of a haunting or a remarkable coincidence is what people still debate today. So that, I would listen more to what the report said for like ever before the picture came about. A couple more things to read. Whoops. wait, I don't want to read that yet. Okay, so I showed you the picture. Now, I'm going to go ahead and play the video. Like I said, okay, I don't know if I explained this. I'm actually not going to explain it. I'm not going to say what I think yet. I'm going to play a portion of a video by Lester Sumrall, and I have played this in other episodes, but it's definitely super relevant to this subject. And here's the thing, Lester Sumrall, he cast devils out all over the world. He actually was like the first person to do deliverance ministry. Not that people didn't cast devils out before he did, they did, but nobody really like taught on it. So when he went into ministry and encountered his first demon possessed person, he didn't like, he was like 20 years old, 21 years old. He didn't know what to do. There's a girl on the floor with like green foam coming out of her mouth. He looks at the pastor. The pastor's looking at the ceiling, anywhere but at the girl. No ushers going forward to help. He's like, I'm going to have to deal with this. So I think all he said was, be quiet and sit down. So she did. She gets off the floor and then she sits like this, like still, but she's like, there's a look in her eye, right? So he finishes his service and he gives an altar call for people to get saved. And he's like praying internally, Lord, I pray you draw people, you know. And the Lord's like, it's not going to happen in this meeting until you deal with that girl, because she's still got a devil in her. So he's like, I don't know what to do about it. And the Lord's like, you need to cast it out. So he does. He commands it to come out, and it does. And then he told the guy he was traveling with, that was terrible. I hope that never happens again. Well, it happened the next place he went. And this time it was a grown woman. And then it happened everywhere he went. And he thought, well, at least it won't be in America, because I grew up there and I never saw this. He gets back to America and there are demon-possessed people there too. So that became a large part of his ministry, even though he never wanted it to be. It just was like, as he's going and building churches and preaching the gospel, demon-possessed people are just showing up, which is actually what happened to Jesus too. He was going about doing good. He was preaching the gospel and demon-possessed people found him. So same thing happened for Lester Sumrall. He ends up teaching on it and became one of the first people to kind of like explain how to take care of that problem. Derek Prince did too, but Lester Sumrall was one of the first. So I'm going to play this video where he's going to talk about what happened to him in a house in Colorado that he stayed at because he saw something in the doorway and it wasn't a person.
And if it isn't related to the occult, like this story I just told you, then it is related to crime and to bloodshed. Such as
so let me explain what he's saying. He said, if you see or encounter a ghost in a house, he said it's usually there because of either crime, like murder, bloodshed, or someone was dabbling in witchcraft.
Murder having taken place. Demon entities use many forms, including manifestations in all the five senses. The manifestation is usually to announce their presence or to annoy humans. And they are related. I was in a home in Denver, and it was a home in those days that was about $65,000 or $75,000, and that home today would be maybe $175,000. It was a very, very nice home on a big four-lane street with trees all down the middle of the street and all. It was a very pretty area, and I had this nice bedroom away in the back away from the rest of the house. You'd come through the living room and the bedrooms and the kitchen room, and even back of that was this very special guest room. And so that was the room that I was using there, and it was a Christian home. And I was suddenly wakened about 2 o'clock in the morning, and in my door was something, and
something,
and I could look and I could tell it with long hair and white looking hair, not white, but blonde hair, and dressed in a negligee. And
for those of us who are under 400 years old, that means a nightgown. So he sees something in his doorway with long hair wearing a nightgown, and it looks female, and he's like, that's not a person.
I snapped on the light real quick, and there was nothing there. Then I couldn't sleep. So I sat up in bed, and I said, no, that's funny. here in a home where people are Christians, and that thing here in the house at 2 o'clock in the morning. And by the way, the door was shut. She just wasn't using it. And so I, you know, you as funny as I am, I got up and began to look for that thing. And so they had a big...
Let me just pause and say, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't get up and look for it. I would turn the light on, and I'd leave the light on and be like, if you want to tussle with me, you're doing it in the light. But I wouldn't get up out of bed and look for it. I'd stay in bed.
Big, beautiful closet. So I went in there and I found a trap door. Now, this was a house without a basement, you see. And so I opened the trap door, and there was that walking space, that underspace, crawl space underneath. And I got me a light, looked all under there, and to see if I could see some bones, you know, or something. But I didn't see anything. And the next morning at the breakfast table, I spoke to my friend who was quite an intellectual. And I said, there was a murder in this house. He exploded. He said, that's not true. I said, yes, it is. I said, there was a murder in this house. Now, I said, if you would just remember carefully what I say, I'll tell you about it. I said, the woman that was murdered had long hair and was very blonde. And I said, it must have been at night because she was dressed in a negligee. Well, what do you mean? I said, well, I saw that woman about 2 o'clock this morning and back there. And it began to disturb him a little. And he hadn't had the house too long. And so the next morning, he made it his business to visit the neighbors. And he visited all the neighbors that had...
Listen, so would I. He said it disturbed him. Yeah, I would also be disturbed if someone who was a guest in my house said they saw some demonic ghost or something. And I mean, I'd be disturbed too. So I don't blame him. They were, you know, they didn't have that house for that long. So he's like, I'll see what the neighbors know before I moved in.
Been there for some time. And he came back to me with his head and face kind of fallen. He said, yes. It says there was a Swedish doctor and his wife living in this house. And said his story, says he moved to California right after her death. But says his story was that she committed suicide, that she was sick, and that in that back bedroom, she turned a revolver into her stomach and killed herself in the door of that back bedroom. That was a very spot that we had seen her in. But said some of the neighbors felt like she had not committed suicide, that it was otherwise. But said that's what happened here. And then we began talking, and his wife confessed up. Says, I never wanted to confess it because I was afraid to. Says, I can be in the front part of this house alone, and I hear all kind of noises in the back part, and I come back and there's nobody here. And says, I feel a little funny feeling. Says, I start singing a chorus, and I'm all right. And so I told him, I said, now you can do one or two things. I'll pray all over this house, command it to leave. But I said, if you don't have strength to resist yourself, I would advise you to get out of here. They did. They sold it and left. But I went all through the house and prayed for it. And I slept in that bedroom several times after that, and I had no feeling whatsoever. But I just want you to know that there are houses that have entities in them that are not human, and that we, as God's people, have more power than they have, and that we can move them from the place.
So that's literally what he did. He prayed all through the house, told it to leave, and it did. Now, I could let him keep talking, and it is interesting, but I can probably move faster because I've listened to that several times. So he goes on to say, although what he saw looked exactly like the woman who was murdered, and she's wearing a nightgown, and she had the gun in her hand, and it looked just like her, he said, that is not the spirit of that person. That what I saw was not her ghost. What it is what the Bible refers to as a familiar spirit. So it's literally just a demonic spirit that is appearing as a person. So when people tell stories of a haunted house that has a ghost in it, no, I saw like the brown lady in the house we read about in England. No, I saw her. She's dressed in the same clothing that everyone sees her in from the time she lived. It all tracks. It's her. It is not. It is a familiar spirit because something happened in that house that invited it in. Like he said, it's either been murder or bloodshed, crime, or someone's gotten into witchcraft and the occult. And here's the thing. People go to, actually, I'll tell you, someone at my church, I forget his first name. I want to say Nathan, but that might not be right. So when he was 18, he went to prison for selling drugs. Okay. And then he's in for 5 years. So he gets out at 23. Imagine being 23 and you've already done 5 years in prison. So anyway, he gets out of prison and his girlfriend gets pregnant and they have a baby. And then his girlfriend gets really bad postpartum depression and she kills herself. So now he's, already been through some rough stuff and now he's got a baby. His girlfriend's dead. He misses her. So what he did was he went to a medium, and because he missed his girlfriend and wanted to basically contact her or feel better thinking that he could contact her. So he goes to a medium and I don't know what all they did, but then he goes home and then this presence starts to show up in his house. And it seemed like it was his girlfriend. There was familiarity, right? So he started to interact with it. And then before long, it took an evil turn and it tormented him and it scared him to death. It started doing stuff in his house that one night it got so bad, he grabbed his kid and his dog and he ran out of his own house because he's like, I can't be in my house with this thing in here. So he went to a church and told them what was going on. And they basically told him he was crazy. We don't believe in that. And they didn't help him. So then he went to a Catholic church, told them the same thing. And they were like, we believe in that stuff, but they also didn't help him. So then he somehow ended up at my church in Pittsburgh. And he actually came to, we're about to have our biggest event of the year called What No Eye Has Seen. It's a big conference. So he came to that. I think this was in 2024 and responded to the altar call, gave his life to the Lord and got that problem dealt with. And that thing left his house and didn't come back. So it got invited in because he dabbled with the medium, which of course he didn't know what he was getting into. But it left by the blood of Jesus, right? So these things are real and they are in houses, or they could be in objects, or they could be in a forest where people do witchcraft or a cave or whatever. But they're familiar spirits, which will basically impersonate a person that you knew, someone you loved, someone you would want to contact. And that way to get access to you, to get you to engage with them. It's like their foot in the door. And then before long, they're going to torment you. So when people say this house is haunted, I believe there's something in the house. It's probably just a demon. And yes, it might appear like a person, like Lester Sumrall saw, the woman who got murdered. It looked like her, but it's no more than a demonic spirit. And when he prayed over the house, it left. So the Bible talks about this. There are multiple verses where you're told not to dabble in this stuff. And that's why. Not that one. I don't want to read that. This. Yeah. So in Moses's law, there are forbidden practices. Gosh, can I read this from here? So regard them not that have familiar spirits, neither seek after wizards to be defiled by them. So there are a handful of verses here that talk about stay away from these familiar spirits, because that's what they'll do. They're little deceivers. Oh, yes. You miss your grandma? Well, I'll show up and look like your grandma to get you to engage with me. But then before you know it, I'm going to turn on you and torment you. And then people don't know what to do because they don't know what they're messing with. And that this story is crazy from the Bible. So I'll just tell you what happened instead of reading all that. So this is back in the Old Testament. So Israel, God's people, they are told, do not, in fact, God told King Saul, expel all of the witches and the necromancers and all those people out of the land, because we're not supposed to be dabbling in that stuff. So King Saul had all of them leave, but there was one witch at a place called Endor. And so at this point, the prophet Samuel had died, and King Saul had basically fallen out of relationship with God. So he's been asking God what to do about, wars and things like that. And he's not getting an answer. And he's like, I need Samuel, because Samuel always got an answer from God, but he's dead. So what am I going to do? So he finds this witch, one of the last ones at Endor, and he goes to her. He disguised himself so she wouldn't know he was King Saul. He goes to her and he's like, I need you to bring up the spirit of Samuel. And so she starts doing her witchcraft, and then she screams. She freaks out because she actually sees something come up. And then when she realized what happened, she knew it was King Saul. She's like, you deceived me. Now what are you going to do? Kill me? Because I'm not supposed to be practicing witchcraft anymore. And he's like, no, I just need to talk to Samuel, because he's like, God doesn't talk to me anymore and I don't know what to do. So long story short, he has a quick conversation with them, and Samuel is like, you and your sons are going to die tomorrow in battle. And then that's exactly what happened. So you're not supposed to try to communicate with the dead. Even in the New Testament, there's a story where the Apostle Paul is getting followed around by some girl that it says she had a gift of divination, sort of like fortune telling, some type of witchcraft. And she knew who they were. She followed them around for days, and she kept saying, like, these men are servants of the Most High God. And finally he had enough of it, and he turned around. He's like, shut up and come out. Lost his cool. So it did. The spirit came out, and then the people, she was a slave girl. So the people who owned her are then mad, because they're like, that was a moneymaker for us. People would come to her for divination or fortune telling or contacting spirits, that type of thing. So it dresses itself up as one thing, which is why if someone goes to like a psychic or a fortune teller, a medium, some type of witch, and they they tell you something about you that they couldn't possibly know, and then you're like, oh, well, this stuff must be real because no one would have known that about me. Or if it is like more like necromancy, where you're trying to contact the dead, then they might be able to tell you something that you're like, oh yeah, that's, no one would have known that but my dead cousin who I wanted to talk to. So this stuff must be real. I promise you that's a deception, because demonic spirits can know things about you or the past or about something else, and then use that as a deception to get access to you. So you'll interact with them. Before you know it, you're going to end up like the kid from my church with a tormenting spirit in his house that then has to be cast out so you can be free. So I do believe people when they say that there are haunted houses. This actually happened to my dad's friend, which maybe I shouldn't have said who, because I don't know if I have permission. I won't say which friend, but he had a friend, and stuff was happening in that house, like, things you would notice, like, I left this shut and now it's open. I made sure this was open, now it's shut. Stuff was moved around. I think the final straw was he found like the owner's manual for a car in the middle of the living room, and he's like, I don't own this car, and I've never seen this before, and there's no shelf that could have fallen off of. So he's like, there's something like in my house. So long story short, I don't know if I want to, again, I don't have like permission to tell this. I don't know if they would care, but I don't want to get into what happened, but something happened. And if you know what happened, it's no surprise that a demonic spirit would then be in his house. So what they did was he and my dad talked to some elders at the church and explained what was going on, the weird stuff in the house. And they were like, that's clearly just a demon. Just go through every room of the house, command on anything unclean to leave, and it should be good. So they did that. They went through every room, commanded anything unclean to leave. And then my dad goes to sit down on a couch with a window behind him, and there's the front porch. And he sits down and he hears footsteps going down the porch and leaving the house. So he turns and he pulls the curtain at the window, and there's nothing there, but he heard something leave. So there are influences in houses in certain places that God invited in by something, witchcraft or bloodshed. And so obviously those things can be removed. But if it's a forest, there's apparently one in Akron, Ohio, where a bunch of witches do, or at least there used to be, at least 15 years ago, a bunch of witches go in there and do their whatever witches do. And so people have said like that forest, you could like, they would describe it as haunted. You can feel an evil presence when you go there. So you could just bulldoze the forest for one. And then in the case of a house, either cleanse it in the name of Jesus, or move or knock it over. And those things are going to have to leave. So it's not like it can't be dealt with, but even in cases like the Amityville horror house, there really were, obviously Hollywood has I'm sure taken liberties to make their movies about it more interesting, but there are very weird things that happened in that house, and probably stemming from someone having murdered their family. And then, like Lester Sumrall said, when we were watching the video, he said there were more cases in England than anywhere else of houses that were supposedly haunted. One of them had oil and water dripping from the ceiling. And so they go up into the attic or whatever, and there's no source of oil or water dripping, but it just was a constant dripping. They filled, I think, 50, gosh, I don't remember the number, tons of gallons of this liquid oil and water that was dripping out of the ceiling with no source up there, and just other weird stuff like that in some of the houses, stuff coming out of the walls, temperature changing suddenly, even in some cases, people being touched or bitten. Lester Sumrall's the same one too, who in the Philippines, this made like national news in the Philippines when it happened. I think it was probably the 1950s. There was a girl, Clarita Villanueva, she was a prostitute, and her mom was like a spiritist. So this girl like didn't have a chance. I think her parents died. So she's like 16 and she went into prostitution because she didn't have any money. So she made the mistake of trying to pick up a police officer. So he throws her in jail, and she's getting bitten by a demon. And so everyone in the prison is terrified, and it was on the radio. It made national news in the Philippines. So Lester Sumrall was there in the Philippines, in Manila, and he was building a church. So he hears about this on the radio, and he thought, wow, that's terrible. And the Lord was like, go pray for that girl. And he's like, I can't. I'm here building a church because you sent me here to build a church. I'm busy. And the Lord's like, no, you need to go pray for that girl. If you don't go, she's going to die. And he's like, well, that's sad. Why don't you send someone else? And the Lord's like, I don't have anyone else to send. So you need to go. So he's like, okay, that broke my heart. So I went, and, he met with the warden. There were multiple doctors they brought in from like different countries to assess her situation, because obviously they're trying to medically diagnose it. But it wasn't just that she was being bitten by something and they saw the bites, but also people who tried to restrain her. She would look at them and say, you're going to die. And within a couple of days, the person died. So they were like, this is like living evil. So Lester Sumrall goes in, and the demonic spirit inside the girl's looking at him, and he's like, I know why you're here. Lester Sumrall's like, I bet you do. You hate my guts because I'm here to cast you out. So he ends up praying for her. He casts it out. It was either one or two spirits. I don't remember. He casts them out, and then she ends up being okay, and got married, had a family down the road. I think he talked to them, and he asked the husband, how is everything been good? And he's like, oh yeah, I've seen no shred of what happened to her before. You can't even tell it's the same person. So she was completely fine after that. But that night, the night after he cast them out of her, it was either one or two, I don't remember. He's going to sleep in his room, and in the middle of the night, this wind rushes in through the window, and it's such a violent wind. It shakes his bed, which was against the wall, and it shakes it all the way to the middle of the room. So naturally he wakes up, and he looks up, and in the window it's either the one demon or the two that he cast out of this girl. And he's like, oh, I recognize you. And he's like, get out of here. And so they go away, and then he looks around. He looks around, and he's like, wait a minute, my bed is in the middle of the room, and I didn't go to sleep with it in the middle of the room. So he said, it's like 3 a.m. or whatever. I don't feel like moving furniture. So he said, wait a minute, get back here. So he calls him back, and he said, my bed was against the wall when I went to sleep. He's like, put it back. So same thing, wind comes in, and the bed shakes all the way back against the wall. And then he's like, now get out of here. And away they go. So he was something else. He was something else. I love to listen to him. And so some of the stories he has of just encountering demonic, demon possessed people. There was even a tree in one of the countries that he went to, and they said, this is where our gods live, in this tree. And he said it was the strangest tree he'd ever seen, because it's in the middle of the tropics, and yet it didn't have a single leaf on it, which there are leaves everywhere. And he said it twisted and it turned in such an unnatural way. I've never seen anything like it. And you could see there at the base of the tree all of the offerings and sacrifices and whatnot people had left for it. But he said you could just tell by looking at it, that tree was like not natural. So That stuff is real. I don't, when people have these stories of this house is haunted, I'm sure there is an influence in the house. I'm sure there is something going on. But anything that's going to show up as a ghost or a spirit of a person who got killed, that's a familiar spirit. That's a demon. And they're basically impersonating that person in an attempt probably to get you to interact, especially if it's someone you knew. But I know, like, I live in Ohio, and so I'm not far. Actually used to live in Mansfield, which is where the only thing that puts Mansfield on the map, probably besides crime, is the Mansfield Reformatory, which is it's a tourist attraction. It's a super old prison, and they have ghost tours in there. There's a rock concert probably coming up soon, like heavy metal, like hard rock, called Incarceration, and they have it at the Mansfield Reformatory. And supposedly it's like haunted in there, which, again, what is a prison but a big house for a bunch of criminals? So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there are influences or spirits in the prison, because you have a bunch of demon possessed people who've lived there and probably killed other people while there or done horrible things. So the spirits get invited in by crime and bloodshed and things like that. So I wouldn't be surprised. And then I know there's another one. I think it's in West Virginia, not super far from where I live. And it's the same thing. They do like ghost tours, which I would never go on one of those, because there probably are actual demons in there. And that's not the kind of stuff you like go looking for unless you're trying to get like possessed or tormented, which I don't think anyone in their right mind would want. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, that's it. Those two stories. And then my interpretation of that stuff is that they're demonic familiar spirits. The Bible warns about not interacting with stuff like that. And then to hear it from Lester Sumrall, who, again, I would consider the authority on the subject. And again, there's actually one, I'll give you one more. Someone I knew years ago, he and one of his friends, I think it's an old insane asylum. And this actually might be Akron too. And it's closed down. So it's like fenced, signs don't enter. And it has a reputation of being haunted. So I actually watched the footage. He and his friend, illegally entered, and they took videos, and there's some kind of device people use, I guess, like ghost hunters. And it's an EMD reader. I forget what it's called, but basically it's supposed to pick up some kind of energy or activity, and it'll tell you that ghosts are near, right? So they have this like little device, and they're watching it, and they're like, oh yeah, there's stuff in here. And then they're literally I've watched the video. They're talking in the video and saying, if you're here, will you show yourself to us? And I'm like, why would you do that? And again, a lot of people get into stuff and don't understand what can happen. Like there is actually something there, but it's demonic and you don't want to be messing with it. But I just thought that's crazy. I would literally never go into a place that's supposed to be haunted and then start talking to things and ask them to show themselves to me. Like, I would never do that. So I don't remember if they picked up anything in the footage. I don't remember seeing anything. But there have been times, people like the picture we looked at, which could be a manipulated photograph. You can do stuff with cameras and flares and exposure and negatives and whatever. But I'm sure there have been times where things were caught on camera that you didn't see with your naked eye, because there is something evil in the house. So something to stay away from unless you're trying to get demon possessed or scared out of your own house, like the guy at my church. Would not recommend. I don't know, how people like make a living out of ghost hunting. That's insanity to me. But I guess there are shows and it's entertainment, right? Anyway, that's it. I'm going to finish this up and then I'll start part 3 in a little bit. Whoops. So these are the ways to follow Amber Alert Podcast Contact. I am on TikTok, but they are basically kicking me off because apparently you're not allowed to talk about certain things, which I like to talk about. So I virtually have no account because they keep denying everything I try to post. But I will put stuff up on Substack and Spotify later on. And then if you want to, whoops, why is it doing that? If you want to support Amber Alert Podcast, those are the ways that you can. Cash App, Venmo, PayPal, any one of those work. This is for entertainment only, I guess, or information. Yeah. Still not sure why I'm doing this, but until the Lord tells me I don't need to do it anymore, I'm going to do it. All right. Part 3. It's 6:45. I'm going to start part 3 at 7. Yeah. And we'll get into the Bible. So a complete, yes, I touched on the Bible here, but this is a completely different subject. So at 7, it'll be a new live stream. Until then, God bless you and goodbye.